I still remember the exact shade of red on my brother Ryan's face when he first saw the stack of glossy business cards I had printed. I had spent weeks designing them, playing with fonts late at night, trying to find the perfect shade of blue for my little startup logo, and finally holding them in my hand felt like holding a piece of the future. But when I proudly showed them to my family at a Sunday lunch, Ryan leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Wow, look at this, Ethan Carter, founder and CEO. Bro, you literally work out of a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi. Who are you trying to fool?" The table erupted in chuckles, and I felt my chest tighten, the confidence draining from me as quickly as it had built up. "They're just business cards," I muttered, trying to defend myself. "It's about presenting yourself seriously." Ryan rolled his eyes, swirling his drink like some movie villain. "Seriously? Printing fake titles doesn't make you a boss. Clients don't care about cardboard, they care about results. And right now, all you've got is a dream and a laptop. Be real, Ethan." My parents exchanged a nervous glance, the kind that said, maybe Ryan's being harsh, but he has a point. My younger sister, Ava, tried to soften it by saying, "I think the cards look nice," but Ryan laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. "Yeah, nice for Monopoly money. Maybe he can hand them out to the barista who lets him hog the corner table." Everyone laughed again, and I sat there in silence, staring at the neat stack of cards that suddenly felt heavier than bricks. Inside, I was burning, not just with embarrassment but with something sharper, a promise. I clenched my jaw and thought, "You'll see, Ryan. One day, someone important will hold this card and it won't be a joke." That night, back in my small rented apartment, I opened my laptop and got back to work. My startup, CoreLink Solutions, was nothing more than a beta product, a clunky app that helped small businesses manage invoices more easily, but I believed in it with every fiber of my being. I worked 12-hour days, slept 5 hours a night, and poured every ounce of energy into coding, pitching, emailing potential clients. Every rejection stung, but every small yes kept me alive. Months turned into years, and the business grew slowly, painfully, but steadily. Meanwhile, Ryan climbed the corporate ladder at a prestigious multinational. He wore tailored suits, drove a sleek BMW, and posted LinkedIn updates about quarterly wins and leadership panels. At every family gathering, he'd smirk and ask, "So, Ethan, still playing CEO with your business cards?" Sometimes he'd grab one from my wallet and wave it in the air, saying, "Anybody want an autograph from the CEO of Nothing, Incorporated?" My relatives laughed along, and I would smile tightly, never letting them see the fire behind my eyes. They didn't know the late nights, the stress-induced headaches, the ramen dinners while I funneled every spare cent into development. They didn't see the small but loyal base of clients who believed in me, who told me my software was making their lives easier. And I didn't tell them, because I wanted the day of proof to speak louder than my words ever could. That day came sooner than I expected, though not in the way I imagined. It was Ryan's company hosting a massive networking event downtown. CEOs, VPs, entrepreneurs, all gathering in a glittering ballroom with chandeliers and champagne fountains. Ryan, of course, bragged about being on the organizing committee. 1 week before the event, one of my clients, who had grown from a local bakery into a regional chain using my software, called me. "Ethan," she said excitedly, "we've been invited to the event. I want you to come as our guest. You've been a huge part of our growth. I want to introduce you to people who need your product." My heart nearly stopped. This was it. This was the kind of stage I had been dreaming of. I didn't tell Ryan, of course. I showed up quietly, wearing the best suit I could afford, which was nothing compared to his Armani, but it was mine. I tucked a few of those mocked business cards into my pocket. As I walked through the tall glass doors, I could feel the old insecurity creeping in. What if no one takes me seriously? What if Ryan mocks me in front of everyone? But then I thought about the long nights, the loyal clients, the product that actually worked. I wasn't here to prove Ryan wrong. I was here to prove myself right. The ballroom sparkled with laughter, clinking glasses, and confident voices. Ryan spotted me almost immediately. His eyebrows shot up, and he strode over with that trademark smirk. "Ethan? What are you doing here? Did you sneak in with the catering staff?" His friends chuckled behind him, and for a moment, I felt 12 years old again, the butt of his jokes. But before I could reply, my client, Mrs. Thompson, the bakery chain owner, appeared, beaming. "Ethan. There you are." She grabbed my arm warmly and turned to Ryan, who was clearly taken aback. "Ryan, this is Ethan Carter. You know him, right? He's the reason our company scaled so quickly. His software transformed our operations." Ryan blinked, caught completely off guard, as Mrs. Thompson waved over a tall man in a designer suit. "Ethan, I'd like you to meet someone special. This is Charles Grant, the CEO of Orion Global." My pulse raced as the towering CEO extended his hand and said, "So you're the mind behind CoreLink? I've been hearing your name a lot lately. We've actually been looking for solutions like yours." I shook his hand, trying to keep it firm despite the adrenaline surging through me. And then, in front of Ryan and half his colleagues, Charles Grant smiled and said the words I'd been waiting my whole life to hear: "Everyone, meet Ethan Carter, the owner of CoreLink Solutions. A true innovator." The room seemed to spin as heads turned, cameras flashed, and Ryan's smirk finally disappeared. The moment Charles Grant's voice carried through that ballroom introducing me as the owner of CoreLink Solutions, I felt every muscle in my body tighten with disbelief and triumph all at once, because for years I had pictured a moment like this but never imagined it would unfold in front of Ryan and his colleagues. Yet here it was, and I had to keep my composure. Ryan's smirk had evaporated like mist in the sun, and his eyes darted between Charles and me as if trying to reconcile the image of his little brother who once slept on a futon with the man being acknowledged by a CEO he had spent years trying to impress. Mrs. Thompson patted my arm proudly and whispered, "See? I told you this was your stage," and I nodded, barely able to speak as my throat threatened to close from the sheer flood of emotions. Charles led me toward a group of executives, saying, "Ethan's built something powerful, lightweight but scalable, exactly what mid-tier companies need to grow." And I caught Ryan's stunned reflection in one of the ballroom mirrors, his usually confident shoulders slumping as he realized the tables had turned. The executives bombarded me with questions about my platform, and I answered with a calm I didn't know I had, explaining how CoreLink simplified invoice processing, integrated with existing systems, and gave small teams the tools usually reserved for corporations. Every nod, every impressed look was fuel, years of mockery melting away with each approving word. At one point Ryan's boss, a sharp-eyed woman named Karen, approached Charles and asked, "Who's this young man everyone's gathered around?" And Charles replied without hesitation, "Ethan Carter, the owner of a rising star. You'll want to know his name." I could practically feel Ryan shrink behind me, because for years he had relished being the one introduced, the one praised, the one admired, and now he was the silent spectator. Later in the evening, after countless handshakes and even a few exchanged business cards, the same kind Ryan had once mocked, I stepped aside to catch my breath, gripping a glass of water like a lifeline. That's when Ryan finally approached, his tone stripped of arrogance but still laced with bitterness. "So, you actually pulled it off," he muttered, his eyes narrowing. "I didn't think you had it in you." I looked at him steadily and replied, "That's the difference between us, Ryan. You never believed, but I never stopped." He scoffed, trying to regain some footing. "Don't get too cocky. One good event doesn't make you a success." I smiled faintly, sliding one of my cards from my pocket and holding it out. "No, but it helps." He hesitated, then snatched it from my hand, glaring at the bold letters, "Ethan Carter, founder and CEO, CoreLink Solutions," as if they were mocking him back. The rest of the night blurred with conversations, promises of follow-ups, and the kind of connections I used to dream about, but one thing burned brighter than the chandeliers above me, the realization that I was no longer the shadow in my brother's story. I was writing my own. In the weeks that followed, CoreLink exploded with new opportunities. Partnerships, pilot programs, even venture capital interest began flooding in, and each time I signed a deal or onboarded a client I thought back to that family lunch where Ryan had ridiculed my cards, wondering if he replayed those words in his head with regret. Our parents certainly noticed the shift. At dinner one night Dad said carefully, "Ethan, we're proud of you. It's not easy to build what you've built," and Ryan stabbed his fork into his food without looking up. Mom tried to lighten the mood by saying, "You boys have different paths, both valuable," but I caught the flicker of pride in her eyes that couldn't be hidden. Ava, my sister, grinned openly at me and whispered, "Told you the cards looked good." Still, Ryan's resentment grew, though he masked it with passive comments. He'd say things like, "Well, let's see if your app can survive the real market," or, "Don't forget, Ethan, hype doesn't last forever." I let the remark slide because I knew something he didn't. Corelink wasn't hype, it was solving real problems, and word was spreading fast. Then came the twist I never expected. A few months later Ryan called me out of the blue. His voice was tight, almost desperate. "Ethan, I need to talk to you. Privately." We met at a quiet cafe and he showed up looking nothing like the polished executive I was used to. His tie was loose, his eyes tired, and his hands shook slightly as he stirred his coffee. "Things aren't good at my firm," he admitted finally. "There's been restructuring. My position might be on the line." I blinked, unsure what to say. This was Ryan, the golden boy, the untouchable. "I thought you were indispensable there," I said carefully. He gave a bitter laugh. "So did I. But apparently, no one is. They're cutting costs, and new leadership doesn't care about loyalty." For a moment, I felt a twinge of pity, but then he added, "That's why I came to you. Your company is growing, right? Maybe there's a place for me." My mind reeled. Ryan, who had once laughed at my cards, now asking for a spot at the company those cards represented. It was surreal. I studied him, weighing my words. "Ryan, if you want to work with me, it has to be real. No mocking, no belittling. Respect, or nothing." He swallowed hard, pride battling with desperation in his eyes, and finally nodded. "I get it. I was wrong about you, Ethan. About all of this. I see that now." Hearing those words was almost as satisfying as Charles Grant's introduction months earlier because they came not from a CEO but from the brother who had doubted me most. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "We'll see what we can do. But you'll have to earn your place, just like anyone else." He nodded again, and for the first time in years, the smirk was gone, replaced by something I had longed to see, genuine humility. Bringing Ryan into Corelink was one of the hardest decisions I ever made because part of me still held on to the sting of every insult, every laugh at my expense, every time he waved one of my cards in the air like it was a joke. Yet another part of me, the part that remembered long nights when we were kids sharing a bunk bed and whispering dreams into the dark, wanted to give him a chance, wanted to believe he could change. I didn't hand him a cushy title, though. No, Ryan started small, as a consultant helping with client onboarding and process documentation. The look on his face when he realized he wasn't walking in as an executive was priceless, but to his credit, he didn't complain. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work, and to my surprise, he was good. He had a knack for communication, smoothing over client concerns, translating technical jargon into language even the most old-school business owner could understand. I watched from a distance, half waiting for him to slip into his old arrogance, but he didn't, at least not right away. Weeks turned into months and Ryan became a regular presence at Corelink HQ, which was still more startup scrappy than corporate glossy. The team was wary of him at first. After all, they'd heard me joke, and sometimes rant, about my brother's endless mockery, but slowly they warmed up as they saw his effort. One afternoon, after he closed a particularly tough client, my lead developer Jenna whispered to me, "He's actually not bad." Who knew? I just shrugged, still cautious but quietly hopeful. Then came the test. We landed a massive meeting with Orion Global, the same corporation whose CEO had introduced me months earlier. They wanted to discuss a partnership that could triple our reach overnight. The stakes couldn't have been higher. I prepped the team for days, running through demos, perfecting slides, rehearsing answers to possible questions. Ryan volunteered to help, offering to run the pitch delivery since he had years of corporate presentation experience. My gut clenched at the thought of handing him the spotlight, but my team agreed he could add polish we lacked. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep, pacing my apartment and wondering if I was making a mistake. What if he botched it? What if he made it about himself instead of the company? By morning, I decided to trust him, or at least, trust that I could step in if needed. We walked into Orion's glass skyscraper, the kind of building that screamed power, and were ushered into a conference room with a table so long it looked like a runway. The executives filed in, including Charles Grant himself, and all eyes turned to us. Ryan stood at the front, suit pressed, tie perfect, posture commanding. For a second, I flashed back to the Ryan who had mocked me over turkey dinner, smirking at my cards, but then he began to speak, and he was brilliant. He wove stories about small businesses transformed by our software, painted visions of efficiency and growth, and every time he gestured toward me and said, "My brother built this," my chest swelled with a mix of pride and disbelief. He wasn't mocking me. He was honoring me. The presentation ended in a round of applause, and Charles Grant himself said, "Impressive. Very impressive. Let's discuss next steps." We left that building with a handshake agreement that would change CoreLink forever. In the elevator, Ryan looked at me with a crooked smile and said, "See? Those years of boardroom showmanship finally came in handy." I laughed, the tension breaking, and replied, "Yeah, I guess those business cards weren't such a joke after all." For a while, things were good, better than I ever thought they could be. Ryan and I worked side by side, complementing each other's strengths. I was the builder, the product visionary. He was the communicator, the strategist. Investors loved the brother dynamic, clients trusted us more, and even our family gatherings felt lighter as the old rivalry eased. But success has a way of testing people, and soon the cracks began to show. As CoreLink's valuation climbed, as the office filled with new hires and the press started calling me a rising star, Ryan began to slip back into old patterns. He started dropping my name less in pitches and his own more, saying things like, "I lead the client relations team," or "I'm driving our enterprise deals," subtly shifting the narrative. I overheard him once at a networking event when someone asked if he was the founder. He didn't correct them right away. Instead, he paused, smiled, and finally said, "My brother started it, but I've really helped scale it." It wasn't technically untrue, but it wasn't the whole truth either, and it stung. I tried to brush it off, telling myself he was just proud to be part of the company, but late at night, lying awake, I wondered if I had made a mistake bringing him in. The final straw came at a quarterly team meeting. We had just landed another huge contract and the room was buzzing. I stood up to thank everyone, as I always did, but before I could finish, Ryan jumped in. "And let's not forget the reason we closed that deal," he said loudly. "It was the relationships I built, the hours I spent convincing them we're the right fit. Without that, we'd still be waiting on callbacks." The room went quiet, eyes flicking between us. I forced a smile, nodding, but inside I was fuming. It was as if he couldn't help himself, as if the old Ryan, the one who needed to be the star, was clawing his way back. After the meeting, Jenna pulled me aside and said softly, "Ethan, he's good, but don't let him steal your story. You built this." Her words echoed in my mind for days. Ryan wasn't just working at CoreLink anymore, he was starting to rewrite its history, and I couldn't let that happen. The breaking point came faster than I expected because once Ryan tasted the spotlight he couldn't resist grabbing more, and the brother who had walked into my startup humbled and desperate slowly transformed back into the man who once mocked me with cruel laughter over dinner tables. It all came to a head at the Orion Global signing ceremony, the deal that would cement CoreLink as a powerhouse, the kind of partnership that startups dream about but almost never achieve. The room was filled with executives, reporters, even a few photographers snapping away, and as we prepared to finalize the agreement Charles Grant himself asked me to speak about the journey of CoreLink. I stepped to the podium, heart pounding but proud, ready to talk about the sleepless nights, the clients who took a chance on me, the years of building from nothing, but before I could utter a single sentence Ryan smoothly slid in beside me, placing a hand on the microphone. "Before Ethan says anything, he began, voice polished and confident, "I just want to share a little bit about how we got here. Corelink has been a vision, yes, but also a strategy, and I've been honored to lead that strategy, shaping the relationships, guiding the deals, making sure our growth was sustainable." My chest tightened as the words spilled out, each one subtly recasting the narrative so that he wasn't just my brother helping out but a co-architect of everything I had bled to build. Cameras flashed, pens scribbled, and I stood frozen, caught between anger and disbelief. He wasn't outright lying, but he was bending the truth until it looked like he was my equal, maybe even more. When I finally spoke, my voice shook but I forced it steady. "Yes, Ryan has helped us grow, and I'm grateful for that. But let's not forget, the seed of Corelink started long before strategy meetings or big deals. It started with a laptop in a cafe, with rejection after rejection, with belief when no one else believed. That's what brought us here today." There was polite applause, but the moment had been tainted, the spotlight shared when it should have been clear. Afterward, I confronted him. "What was that?" I hissed as we stepped into the hallway. His face was calm, almost smug. "Relax, Ethan. I was just setting the stage. You don't understand how corporate optics work. They want to see leadership, not just code." I clenched my fists. "Leadership doesn't mean erasing me from my own story." He rolled his eyes. "You're too sensitive. You should be thanking me. Without my polish, half these deals wouldn't exist." The old fury I thought I had buried surged up. "Without my work, without those years you mocked, there wouldn't even be a company to pitch. Don't forget that." For the first time since joining Corelink, I saw something dark flicker in his expression, a mix of jealousy and contempt. "Maybe you're not cut out to be the face of this company," he said quietly. "Maybe it needs someone who knows how to play the game." My stomach dropped. Was he hinting at taking over? The thought haunted me for days as whispers began trickling through the office. I overheard two junior staffers chatting by the coffee machine. "Ryan's really the one running things, isn't he?" one said, and the other replied, "Yeah, Ethan's the tech guy but Ryan's the leader." My heart sank. The narrative was slipping, just like Jenna had warned me. I realized I had to act before my own company was rewritten around me. The twist came not from confrontation but from truth, the kind of undeniable truth that couldn't be twisted. A few weeks later, Orion scheduled a follow-up meeting to discuss integrating our platform into their global network. Ryan had prepped slides, polished his delivery, and strutted into the boardroom like he owned the place. But midway through his presentation, Charles Grant interrupted. "This is all very impressive, Ryan. But I'd like to hear from Ethan, the owner. After all, none of this would exist without his vision." The word owner landed like thunder. Ryan froze, his carefully rehearsed lines dying on his lips, as all eyes shifted to me. Slowly, I stood and walked to the front. My palms were sweating but my voice was clear. "Thank you, Charles. You're right. Corelink started as my idea, built line by line of code in lonely nights when no one believed it mattered. And while I'm grateful for everyone who's joined the journey, let's be absolutely clear, this company exists because I refuse to give up." The silence that followed was electric, every executive in the room absorbing the weight of those words. Charles nodded firmly, then turned back to the group. "And that's why I trust Corelink, because it was built from grit, not just polish." Cameras flashed again, but this time Ryan wasn't beside me, he was in the corner, face pale, forced to clap along with everyone else as the ownership of the story was reclaimed in full view of the people who mattered most. After the meeting he stormed into my office. "You humiliated me," he snapped. I stared at him, exhausted but resolute. "No, Ryan. I told the truth. And if the truth humiliates you, maybe you should think about why." His fists clenched, but instead of fighting he turned and slammed the door behind him. That night, I sat in the office long after everyone else had gone, the city lights flickering through the window, and I realized that the real battle wasn't about deals or titles, it was about identity. Ryan needed to be seen as the star, but I had already learned the hard way that real success doesn't come from appearances. It comes from resilience, from the years no one clapped, from the belief no one shared. And in that moment I vowed I would never let anyone, brother or not, rewrite my story again. The weeks after the Orion meeting were tense, like a storm cloud hovering over every conversation in the office. Ryan kept his distance, but I could feel the resentment radiating off him every time we crossed paths. He still showed up to meetings, still dressed sharp, still spoke confidently, but something had shifted, the mask of partnership was cracked, and beneath it his envy was raw. The team sensed it too, whispers floated in the hallways, loyalty lines were drawn, and for the first time I realized my company could split from the inside out if I wasn't careful. Jenna warned me one evening as we sat at the kitchen table over takeout. "He's not going to let this go, Ethan. You showed him up in front of the most powerful people he's ever been around. He'll want revenge." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't want revenge. I just want to protect what I built." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then be smart. He's your brother, but he's not above undermining you." Her words echoed in my head when, a week later, I got a call from an investor who had been with us since the early days. His voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. "Ethan, I've been hearing things. That Ryan's really the brains now, that you're stepping back. Is that true?" My stomach twisted. "No, that's not true at all. CoreLink is my vision, always has been. Don't believe rumors." But after the call ended, anger bubbled inside me. Ryan wasn't just jealous, he was actively rewriting the story behind my back. The breaking point came at our quarterly team meeting, where we gathered the whole staff to share updates and vision. I had planned to talk about our next big product launch, a project I'd poured months into, but before I could speak, Ryan stood up uninvited and launched into a monologue about strategy, growth, leadership. He used I more than we, painting a picture where he was the guiding force and I was just the quiet tech guy. I sat there, fists clenched under the table, heart pounding. Finally, I stood. "That's enough." The room went silent, dozens of eyes swiveling to me. My voice trembled at first but grew stronger. "I need to make something very clear, right here, right now. CoreLink started because of me. It exists because I refused to quit, because I believed when no one else did. Ryan has contributed, and I appreciate that, but don't ever get confused about whose company this is. I am the founder, the owner, and the vision behind everything we do." The silence was heavy, every employee holding their breath. Ryan's face went red. "So what, you're saying I don't matter? That everything I've done is nothing?" I looked at him, pain and anger mixing in my chest. "I'm saying you matter as my brother, but as for this company, this is mine. And if you can't accept that, then maybe you don't belong here." Gasps rippled across the room. Ryan's jaw tightened, and without another word he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The meeting continued awkwardly, but something had shifted, clarity had been restored. The next day, Ryan didn't show up to work. Nor the day after. Eventually I got an email. A resignation letter, short and cold. "I'll find my own way," it said. For a moment, I felt relief. The tension was gone, the company was safe, the truth was secured. But as the weeks passed, I felt something else too, a hollow ache where my brother used to be. We weren't close growing up, but we were still family, and losing him this way stung more than I wanted to admit. Life went on. CoreLink grew faster than ever, our Orion partnership catapulting us into new markets. Investors praised our focus, employees thrived under clear leadership, and for the first time in years, I felt the joy of building without looking over my shoulder. But late at night, when the office lights were dim and the city hummed outside, I found myself thinking about Ryan, about that smirk when he called me the dropout, about the pride in his voice when he first joined CoreLink, about the anger in his eyes the day he walked out. I didn't miss his ambition or his ego, but I missed my brother. The twist came months later when I received a call from a mutual friend. "Ethan, have you heard? Ryan's company, it collapsed. Some bad deals, reckless spending. He lost everything." My chest tightened. I didn't gloat, didn't smile. Instead, a wave of sadness washed over me. I thought back to the boy he once was, chasing dreams before bitterness took over, and I wondered if things could have been different. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring at the city lights, and whispered, "I never wanted to see you fall, Ryan. I just wanted you to see me." The journey had given me everything I dreamed of: success, recognition, respect, but it had cost me my brother. And in that silence, I realized that even the brightest victories can cast the darkest shadows. When I finally saw Ryan again, it wasn't in a boardroom or at a family dinner, but in a small cafe on the quiet side of town, the same kind of place where I had once sat with nothing but a laptop and a dream. He looked different, older somehow, his sharp suits replaced by a wrinkled shirt, his confident smirk replaced by weary eyes. For a moment I almost didn't recognize him, but when he looked up and our gazes met, I saw the same brother I had grown up with, buried beneath years of pride and rivalry. "Ethan," he said quietly, as though the name itself was heavy. I sat across from him, unsure what to feel. Anger? Pity? Relief? Instead, I just said, "Hey, Ryan." Silence stretched between us until he finally spoke, his voice low. "I screwed up. I thought I could prove something, thought I could show the world I wasn't just living in your shadow. But I chased the wrong things, made the wrong bets, and now I've got nothing." I studied him, searching for traces of the arrogance that had once poisoned our relationship, but all I saw was defeat. "You haven't got nothing," I said carefully. "You've still got family. If you want it." His eyes flickered with emotion, a mix of shame and longing. "Do I, though? After everything I did to you? After I tried to steal your story?" My chest tightened. Memories flashed, him mocking my business cards, undermining me at Orion, walking out of the company in anger. But then I remembered something else too, the boy who once stood up for me at school, the brother who used to dream with me before the world taught us to measure worth by titles and applause. "You hurt me, Ryan," I admitted. "You almost cost me everything I worked for. But you're still my brother. And I'd rather try to rebuild something with you than pretend you don't exist." His eyes watered, and for the first time in years, I saw the walls between us crack. He leaned forward. "I don't deserve it, Ethan. But, thank you." The conversation stretched into hours, weaving through pain and laughter, regret and hope. He told me about the collapse of his company, about the partners who turned on him, about the humiliation of losing it all so publicly. I listened, not to gloat but to understand. And when it was my turn, I told him about the loneliness of success, about how the higher core link rose the more I felt the absence of a brother beside me. By the time we left the cafe, something fragile but real had formed between us, a truce, a beginning. I didn't bring him back into CoreLink, that chapter was closed. But I offered him something else, a chance to consult on projects, to use his talent without the poison of power games. Slowly, cautiously, he accepted. Over time, we carved out a new relationship, one that wasn't about who stood in the spotlight but about respecting each other's paths. And in the end, that was the twist neither of us had expected, that forgiveness, not victory, would be the real legacy of our rivalry. Months later, at a major conference, I was invited to give a keynote about entrepreneurship. As I stood before thousands of people, I thought back to those first business cards, the ones Ryan mocked, the ones he called worthless. Pulling one from my pocket, I held it up for the crowd. "This," I said, "was where it started." People laughed at it, even people close to me. But this little card represented belief. Belief in myself when no one else believed. And if you take anything from my story, let it be this: never let anyone else define your worth. Because the moment you stop believing in yourself is the moment you hand your story to someone else to write. The applause thundered, lights flashing across the stage, but as I looked out into the crowd my eyes found one familiar face, Ryan, sitting in the audience, clapping with a small, genuine smile. In that moment, I realized that my journey hadn't just been about proving myself to the world or even to my brother. It had been about learning that true success isn't just measured in millions or empires, but in the ability to stand tall in your truth, to forgive, and to keep moving forward no matter who doubts you. My brother once mocked my business cards, and for years his words haunted me. But now, as the owner of a thriving company and the keeper of my own story, I understood something deeper. The same cards he laughed at had become the foundation of everything.